Hey guys, and welcome back. So, happy Lunar New Year. It's the year of the tiger, but you know what? I knew we were being lied to when we were getting this whole sugar-coated version of what Lunar New Year is. At least the way that it's practiced now in Korea, because there has been a critical part of the history that has been kept from us. I hope all of you, especially in the United States and perhaps around the world, if you celebrated by eating dumplings, and if you're Chinese, giving each other little red envelopes and, making it look all nice and cute and harmless for maybe the non-Asian people out there. But what we're going to get into today is what Korean people did after they ate that bowl of soup and went ahead and did things that were not so peaceful. So I know there's some Asian Americans who are just embracing their heritage and finally thinking that, oh my gosh, it's not so embarrassing to like these rice cakes or these moon cakes or these dumplings now that all these hipster people are like really into it, that maybe some people now that are outside of their family unit won't laugh at them for celebrating Lunar New Year, and now you're all like, woohoo, yay, Asian representation, even though like people are still like, pushing people off subways and stuff and beating people up, and there's like, oh, but Asians are so, where it's not in our nature to fight back or what are we supposed to do about it? We're just a peaceful people. Oh, honey, let me tell you right now, if it was 100 years ago in Korea, you would be getting up from sunrise to sunset if you were a man or even a little boy and going out to the fields, picking up some stones, getting ready for battle. So I had not known this, but an opinion columnist just wrote on the Korea Times. I guess he's a European American historian of Korean history, and he brought up this thing called seok-jeon, which is essentially translated into stone wars. And what would happen is that from sunrise to sunset for several days, right after Lunar New Year, and then also the Autumn Harvest Festival, there would be villagers who would gather out in the fields and basically go for a battle, like village against village, to get out their aggression and find their own justice by throwing stones at each other without any protective equipment, and then even using sticks when the stones ran out to just, go at it until the other side declared that they surrendered. What this was supposed to be, I guess, was a way for society to have a release valve for their grievances, for their injustices, for all the pent-up frustrations that they may have had against other villagers or other neighbors or any kind of group that you were part of that had a problem with another group. There were essentially government or kingdom-sanctioned days after each major holiday. We have two of them here, the Lunar New Year and then also the Autumn Thanksgiving. And that is when you were given a free pass to go maul your enemy with stones and sticks, right? Sticks and stones, yeah, they were able to break some bones. And some people emerged with broken teeth, broken limbs, or they may not have emerged at all. And the silent code, kind of like, like the code of Fight Club, was that you never mentioned the casualties. And so the government or the authorities at the time just turned a blind eye. And it was, I guess, the elite's way of letting the common people work out their own sense of justice. So, in a way, horrible. That's a horrible system that shows like a very stratified society where there's no law and order, there's no justice system to take care of conflicts in a civilized manner. And so, yeah, this was pre-modern civilization, so I guess that makes sense. When did this start? This started a long time ago. Apparently, the historians say Goguryeo dynasty, which basically started in 37 BC. So, for 2,000 years until the end of the last Korean dynasty was basically at the turn of the 20th century. And we have written accounts by Western visitors and academics or whatever reason why they were here in Korea. They would chronicle this, and it was kind of written down as like, oh, they're playing their sports that they usually do after Lunar New Year. I'm like, honey, that was probably some good 19th century PR calling it sports. But no, these were people who needed to be out for some bloodthirsty revenge. Okay, and this is like Korean people throwing rocks at Korean people just after they had their dumplings, after they had their rice cakes, after they bowed probably to their grandparents. The guys went out, even the young boys, because, I guess the parents thought it's going to toughen them up, and they would engage in this brutal rock throwing. It was outlawed in 1912, apparently, when the Japanese had occupied. They called it barbaric, but I mean, that's like, calling the kettle black, because apparently the Korean people, when they rebelled, they would also use the same tactics against Japanese invaders. And even before the imperial forces came into Korea, Korean people were very good with this rock strategy in terms of a military attack. The historians that I saw when researching this a bit said that from, thousands of years ago, ever since one general figured out how to mobilize his forces to use rocks, they said that it was almost as effective as archers in some situations. So, before guns and gunpowder, for another source of projectiles, were basically throwing stones. And apparently Koreans were really good at that, and it became an integral part of warfare. And so then apparently the elites just let that form of fighting descend to the masses. So whenever you had some, these simmering conflicts among communities, they'd say, well, just wait until the holidays when all your relatives are back in town, and then just gather together, and then why don't you just have a sport at it? And so they were just throwing, and I guess that's how they let out aggression. That's how they got revenge. But at the same time, that's how you create new cycles of revenge that then carry on 6 months later to the next battle. So every 6 months, they were able to renew this fight. So when you really look at it, those demonstrations in modern Korea, after this was all outlawed, but then you saw a lot of riots and mobs, and when they were either fighting the Japanese or fighting the dictators or any kind of social conflict where they started to take to the streets and there was mob violence where they're using sticks and throwing things, I was just like, wow, that looks exactly like the way that these illustrations and these depictions of the old seok-jeon look like. And so it must, I don't want to say so much of it gets passed down, but I could see now how it makes so much sense, and that we've kind of been denied that part of our history because maybe it looks ugly. And it is ugly. You're not supposed to use violence as a form of justice, but I do think it's important for at least especially Asian Americans who have bought into this narrative that by nature Asians are not aggressive, to really look at their history. Because especially now, while you're probably just being like, oh, how cute, we have another, Chinese New Year or Lunar New Year with a cute little animal as the mascot. No. Well, at least in Korea, I don't know about all the other Asian countries, but at least in Korea, the guys would be collecting their best stones and getting ready for battle. And don't think that doesn't happen in the modern era either. Sticks and stones may break my bones, but words will never hurt me. But yeah, they're using words now. Right now, the presidential candidates are at each other's throats, and a big part of that was this argument over whether the top two candidates could have their own separate debate or whether it has to be a 4-person debate. But yeah, believe me, they are tearing each other up behind the scenes with words, with their clan on clan on clan, and I bet this is their version of seok-jeon after they probably ate their nice tteokguk. And it doesn't even have to be these days limited towards the holidays. I mean, again, from my other video, you saw that my friend Julie got shot in the face with a high-powered pressure hose over a parking lot by her own business partner. So you could kind of see how maybe if you're of that mindset, you'll be waiting for one of these holidays to throw a stone back. Well, thank goodness we have the legal system, and just a quick update on that. That business partner lost the legal debate, and so now he is not allowed to do anything with that property. And so he came groveling back a few days ago trying to make a deal with like, oh, let's develop this parking lot and let's split the profit. She's like, no. He's like, oh, let me have that first floor where, basically I rammed 3 cars into and then tried to set up a swap meet against everyone's will and threw people, and like they were having a brawl just like this. And she's like, no. And then apparently on that land where he wanted to build the parking lot, like a little bit right next to it, there's an adjacent building that had been torn down by the neighbor, and they needed some of the land that is part of the artist community. And that business partner behind Julie's back went and said like, okay, you can have this little bit of the land, but give me $200,000. Well, now that has come to light. And so this, egregious, totally egregious behavior by this business partner willing to exert violence like that in that rubble. It was full of rocks over there. And she was an executive at Cushman and Wakefield, right? Yeah, that global property management and real estate corporation. Okay, so if you're willing to do that against somebody who's a former executive at like one of those big real estate, oh my goodness, where is the line? Apparently there is no line. So apparently these battles lasted from like sunrise to sunset, and it could last for days, and you just kept going until you pulverized your enemy. And these are your own people. So imagine that, Asian Americans. Imagine that. If Korean people are willing to do that to other Korean people, don't you think you can take a little bit more of an aggressive stance to defend yourself with all of this Stop Asian Hate? I'm not saying violence is the answer. We should never use violence. But don't just roll over and take it because you think it's not in your nature to fight. If you can't fight in the moment, then you should definitely use the modern mechanisms that we have to fight back. And you guys, I think this is not just a Korean thing, and I think there might just be something lingering in the air even if you're not celebrating the Lunar New Year holiday, because did you know over in Pennsylvania, these are all non-Asian people, at least from the video from what I saw, there was a news report about a whole restaurant that got into a brawl. 40 people who went to the Golden Corral, never heard of it, but apparently there was a conflict over a steak because somebody got their steak first, even though they ordered it after some other group. But this guy, according to his position, says that, well, I ordered it rare, so that's why it came out faster. But oh no, it turned into a brawl and it looked just like a seok-jeon. So I'm saying that it is not just limited to Korean people. But over in America, if these people are willing to do all of that over a rare steak versus a well-done steak, shouldn't you Asian Americans do a little bit more over your safety, lives, and physical well-being? Especially, at least if you're Korean, of Korean heritage that is, not but 100 years ago, you'd be throwing stones after dinner. It's kind of a crazy story, huh? I guess it's part of our history. Well, leave your comments below, like, share, subscribe. We'll see you again next time. Bye-bye.